Ferrari's dominance of the United States Grand Prix came on a weekend when it stood out from its rivals in not bringing any upgrades, or to be more accurate, none that it officially declared, with closest challengers, McLaren, Red Bull, and Mercedes, all introducing developments at the Austin track despite being a sprint weekend, was a very bold move. The FIA's official submission sheet that details changes showed no tweaks to the Ferrari car, but that does not tell the true story of Ferrari's approach to the USA weekend, as there are certain tweaks teams can make that do not have to be declared. Article 19.1c of F1's sporting regulations, which covers what items teams have to tell the FIA about, states that this includes all major aerodynamic and bodywork components and assemblies that have not been run at a previous competition or test runs and are intended to be run at the competition. Indeed, after seeing Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz take a 1-2 finish, Ferrari team principal Fred Vasseur repeated several times that just because no upgrades were declared, it did not mean the prancing horse did not have any. "It is not that because we are not declaring something that we are not bringing something," he said. "We have to be clear that the upgrades are about the external shape." Ferrari did not elaborate on what exactly was new for Austin, but speculation has surrounded the possibility that it brought some new specification front wings. While these externally are identical to what it first introduced in Singapore, insiders suggest Ferrari had spent some time since the last race working on optimizing their construction to help exploit aeroelasticity more. In a season when having a more flexible front wing has been instrumental in better balancing a car, helping address the low-speed understeer and high-speed oversteer characteristics of the current ground effect machinery, Ferrari had perhaps been too cautious at the start of the season. And while it privately felt that others were pushing the boundaries too much in how much flexing was going on, recent FIA clarifications that such behavior is allowed opened the door for Maranello to go down this route itself now too. A more optimized flexi wing is not something that will transform a car, but in a season where the gaps between teams are so close, it is a detail that can have an impact. Speaking about the value of a good flexi front wing after what we saw in Austin, Vasseur said, "Clearly it is not a game changer, but we are in the situation today that every single hundredth of a second is making a difference. In qualifying, we had 2 or 3 cars behind us by less than 1/10, and that meant if these details or another one are down to the hundredths of a second, then we have to do it." The new wing design that originally appeared in Singapore is an evolution of its predecessor. Many of the design features are retained, albeit more deliberately. In terms of the actual design changes to the wing, aside from the obvious flap geometry changes, the design of the spoon-shaped transition from the center of the main plane has been altered. This will, in turn, provide a different aerodynamic reaction from the nose assembly. Meanwhile, the outboard section of the flaps has been redesigned where they mate with the end plate. This is in order to enhance the outwash effect being generated and alter the wake generated by the wheel and tire assembly behind. The new flap tips are much more roundly curved, and the supporting metalwork that had previously been employed has been cast aside, which will alter their dynamic behavior as a consequence. Ferrari is also undoubtedly benefiting from a wing designed with a greater ability to exploit aeroelasticity, given the FIA's clearance of solutions fielded by its rivals in recent races. Apart from the front wing, Ferrari also worked on the setup of the car. Vasseur praised the choice of focusing on the third sector, which helped Ferrari manage tire degradation and extend their advantage during the race. "I think the other teams went more in our direction between Saturday and Sunday, but we kept a certain advantage. The team opted for softer mechanical adjustments in Austin, benefiting race pace at the cost of 1 lap speed." Vasseur stated, "In Austin, it's not a drama because the opportunities to overtake are there. I think this was the key factor, as they were able to push more consistently and were not hurting the tires like the rivals." Christian Horner is impressed and stunned by Ferrari's performance. He also believes Ferrari will once again pose a challenge at the Mexico City Grand Prix following their strong performance in the USA. He said in an interview that, "The form is moving from day to day, circuit to circuit. I think Ferrari has bought performance here in USA. They looked very strong, particularly in the race trim." Horner also acknowledged Ferrari's race strategy and competitiveness, stating, "Obviously they sacrificed perhaps a little in qualifying to benefit in the race. I'm sure they'll be competitive in Mexico City." Reflecting on Red Bull's upgrades in Austin, Horner offered a positive assessment, explaining, "I think what it's done is brought the balance a bit closer together. So this disconnect between front and rear, it's brought more of a balance into the car. From the first lap, Max Verstappen was much more competitive. Horner also expressed optimism for the upcoming races, commenting, "He was much happier with the car as soon as we got here, so that's encouraging for some of the races coming up as well." What I think is bringing upgrades to sprint weekend is always a risky gamble, with limited practice sessions available. And what we also observed this season, apart from McLaren, every team struggled with the upgrades brought. And that's why we have seen Mercedes bringing small upgrades to every race weekend since Imola, rather than the whole package at one go. Mexico Grand Prix being a typical weekend, McLaren and Mercedes will have more time to understand their upgrades, which will eventually enhance their performance. So I think McLaren could bounce back at the Mexico Grand Prix. Let me know what you think. Coming back to Ferrari, their performance was good at the Baku and Singapore Grand Prix too. However, due to errors, they were not able to maximize the performance. To be in a constructor fight, they have to take all the chances they have got. They have to be on top of their game in order to beat Red Bull and McLaren for the constructor title. Can Ferrari beat McLaren and Red Bull for constructor, or can Red Bull bounce back? Let me know your views on this. See you all in my next video. Until then, like, share, and subscribe. Take care.